Building AIs inside of MindStudio is just one of the opportunities you have when building solutions for your clients. Today, we're going to look at a workflow that actually works within Google Sheet, which means that it's in a tabular format. If you don't want to chat with a model or even follow a standard workflow like with forms, here you can have everything working inside a Google Sheet. We have 3 sheets here: image generator, email title generator, and related keywords. All of these sheets are connected to MindStudio and to Zapier. So Google Sheet basically acts as the front end, the display of this information. But it doesn't actually do anything because the backend is operated in MindStudio, and the connector between MindStudio and Google Sheet is Zapier. It sounds complicated, but the final result is very good, and it doesn't take that long once you have a bit of familiarity with MindStudio and Zapier. Before we dive into the MindStudio backend and the Zapier flow, I want to show you what this looks like. Let's type in 8 different prompts. This is the great thing about asynchronous workflows and tabular data. You don't really need to wait for the AI to finish a generation. You can just trigger 8 at once. So let's go with cities. For example, Edinburgh, London, New York, San Francisco, Prague, Madrid, and Rome. It looks like it's not doing anything because it takes a little bit of time for the trigger to work and actually return the image URL and image preview, but we're going to look at the result at the end of this video. Let's navigate to the second Google Sheet, and we see email title generator. I copy-pasted 2 emails I received in my account. Let's just enter them as the prompt. So here is email copy 1, and now email copy 2. These will be sent to the MindStudio backend, and it will create the suggested titles. Finally, let's go to related keywords and enter a few marketing keywords: SEO, social media, machine learning, AI in marketing, keyword research, agency AI, and finally, website design. Soon, all of these will be sent to a MindStudio AI. It will process the keywords and find related ones. While we wait for all of this to happen, let's navigate to the Zapier flow. The Zapier is a 3-step Zap. The first step is the trigger. The trigger is new or updated spreadsheet row. We are identifying the spreadsheet as the partner Google Connector plus Zapier. This is the name of the spreadsheet. And then the worksheet. The image generator is the example we're looking at. All of the sheets have their own Zap, which work exactly the same. The only difference is the worksheet and the MindStudio workflow. Finally, we have the trigger column. We don't want to check for any change in the row. We want to check when the prompt row changes. Let's click on Continue, and here is an example. We see the prompt, we see the image URL, and if we click on Find New Records, we'll actually see many more examples of what we just sent. Here we have Rome, Madrid, and Prague. Let's continue with the selected record. The second step is calling MindStudio. To get the MindStudio connector, just click on Add Step in any Zap workflow, search for MindStudio, and you will see our application right there. Then click on Account, and here is where you will connect your MindStudio application. To connect a new app, click on Change and connect a new account. But if you don't have any connected, it will prompt you to connect a new one immediately. We already have the right app connected, so let's click on Continue. Now, this is the most important step, which is mapping the variable. When we call a MindStudio workflow and we are not within MindStudio, we don't have a user interacting with the AI. Basically, the AI runs in the backend, and something needs to happen in the frontend for this to work. In order to initialize the variables, we need 2 things: the variable name, and we also need the workflow name in some instances. For the image generator one, we don't really need the workflow name because this is also the main flow. But for the other ones, you will need to copy the name of this flow and paste it in Zapier, like this. Let's actually do this and we will publish later on. Then you need the variable. Since the API is interacting with the app, This is how the app knows what the prompt is, what it needs to reply to. Let's go back to the app, and if we go in Generate Text, you can see I'm using the prompt variable, but the syntax is a little bit different than usual. The normal syntax for a variable in MindStudio would be simply prompt between graph parentheses. In our example, though, we add $ launch variables, arrow to the right, and then prompt, which is the actual name of the variable. This is how you initialize an API variable. This is how you spell a normal variable when the interaction happens within MindStudio. For example, if I had a user input here, collecting the prompt, and then I wanted to call the prompt later on. But in my example, I'm not getting the prompt anywhere in this workflow. I'm getting it from an outside source, Google Sheet. That's where the prompt is, in a cell in Google Sheet. And then I'm sending that to Zapier, which then sends it to MindStudio in this workflow. To catch that call from the Zapier flow, you need this syntax right here. Launch variables, arrow to the right, prompt. To learn more about the Zapier integration, we have a full 20 minutes tutorial on Zapier alone, and we'll link to that in the description below. The second step here is to generate the image. Now we are in the actual AI backend where all of the magic happens, where the flow shines through, does what it needs to do, and then returns the content to the API, which shows it on the front end, in our example, Google Sheet. And the generate image is responding to the enrich prompt, which is the first step here. We're sending the prompt, we're asking the AI GPT-4o to enrich the prompt, making it a little bit better, and then sending it to DALL-E 3. DALL-E 3 is the model we decided to use for image generation, but we also have the stability models, like Stable Diffusion 3, Stable Image Core, and Stable Image Ultra. This is the step that generates the image. We are then saving the image in the variable image ready. Finally, we are displaying the content. We are displaying image ready. And the reason is that image ready is actually a URL. Whenever you generate an image, you get a URL back. And before we can use that URL in Google Sheet, that URL needs to be shown somewhere. And that's why we use display content. We are showing the URL as the final step in this flow. We then pass the URL to Google Sheet, and we display the URL and the preview of the image, which is recollecting the URL. Let's go back to Zapier, and you can see that the final step in this flow is to update the spreadsheet row. The spreadsheet row we are updating needs to match the ID of the row in step 1, basically the trigger row. So the trigger row in this example is 2, and we are updating row ID 2. What we are updating with is the image URL and image preview. We don't want to update the prompt because that stays the same. We want the user to be able to reference what was the starting point. What we want to update is the image URL and the image preview. The image URL is the response of the flow because, as we established, the final step in this flow is to show what's in image ready, and image ready contains the URL of the generated image. And then we are updating the image preview. The image preview is a construct of =image, open parentheses, quote marks, and then the response, which is, again, the URL. That's just a syntax in Google Sheet to represent, to visualize an image. And it's just nicer to be able to see the preview rather than just the URL. This sounds very complicated, but once you do it a couple of times, it's really not that complicated. You get used to it. And the other flows work exactly in the same way. We have a Zapier portion that triggers when a spreadsheet row starts. We run a workflow in MindStudio, and we update the flow. It looks like this hamburger, and it's exactly the same for all of these flows. Same thing here, we have one application that we call for all of these workflows, and you have one that generates an image, one that generates the titles, and one that generates the keywords. The one that generates the image is actually the most complex one because the others only have one block. That one block is a generate text block, which basically is a prompt. We are calling only one variable, the email variable for the email to titles, and the keyword variable for the related keywords variable. These also include, of course, the instructions, so what the AI is in the main prompt. This is a highly skilled SEO expert. This is an expert email marketer, etc. We instruct the personality, and it includes the formatting rules. This is what we want in the final output, and it's what we will see in Google Sheet soon. MindStudio is model agnostic. You can use any model you want to generate this text, just like we've seen for the image. Here, you can use all of the different text models from Anthropic, Cohere, Google, Meta, Mistral, OpenAI, Perplexity, and Recount. You can change the temperature if you decide to use another model, for example, called Resonet, and the maximum response tokens, so the maximum output for this particular one. You can also decide to use the inherited model, which is coming from model settings for this particular workflow. You can expand on this as much as you want. For example, you could add a data source to use RAG. You could use functions. You could use a very complicated workflow setup to get more information out of this workflow. But for the time being, this is a generic setup that you can use as a boilerplate to get started using Google Sheet and tabular apps in general, because it will work the same in apps like Smartsheet and Airtable, Notion tables, etc. To use them as the front end that then calls your AI to do something and uses Zapier as a middle ground. It's the connector between the two. Now let's take a look at what actually happened in Google Sheet. Let's go back to Google Sheet. We are back in Google Sheet, and as you can see, social media, machine learning, AI marketing, all of these now have a second step here. All of these now have a second column, which includes the NLP keywords, LSI keywords, related keywords, topical map for this keyword, the seed keyword. In the image generator, you'll be able to see the image URL and image preview of all of these cities. Here we have Edinburgh, here we have London, here we have New York. And if you click on the URL, you can look at the big size picture. The same is true for the email titles. You will see the output, which are 10 email titles for the copy provided. I hope this helps, and happy building.